Talked about the St John's wort oil, and we've picked some and we've got the oil, and we were just discussing with the sound guy that the people online, they want to access this, so he filmed us picking it yesterday. So we're going to do, so the people online will get it, but it's not ready yet. But right now we're going to talk about that third law of health. What's that third law? Sunshine, use of water, sleep. And there's a tiny little gland, and this little gland is in the base of your brain, and it's called the pineal gland. And the pineal gland releases 4 hormones every night, but it only releases the hormones in certain hours. Light and dark signals are fed through the optic nerve to a control centre in the brain where your body clock is located. So it's the light and dark signals that have a lot to do with the release of these hormones. So the moon, the sun, the tides, they all influence the release of these hormones. And summertime, they're released between 10 and 3 a.m. and wintertime, it's released between 9 and 2 a.m. So these hormones, what are they? One is epithalamin, and epithalamin increases learning capacity. So it's very important, especially for the students. Well, you'll discover when we look at the mind that we should never stop learning. And so one way to increase our ability to retain and understand the information is to go to bed early and access the release of your epithalamin. So epithalamin increases learning capacity. So if I talk to teachers, I say, can you tell the children that had late nights? They said, oh yes. It seems they have difficulty concentrating, retaining, understanding. Well, they didn't get their epithalamin. And epithalamin does something else. It slows down aging, and everyone over the age of 25 likes that one. Now you look at rock stars who commonly go to bed extremely late, probably 2 a.m, and have a look at them when they're in their 60s. It's like Mick Jagger. From a distance he might look okay, he's got brown hair and he's slim, but don't look too close. the skin is certainly showing the age. Also, arginine vasotocin. Arginine vasotocin is a hormone that puts us into a deep sleep. So some people that can't sleep well think if they go to bed later, they're more likely to get tired and go, into a deep sleep. But the opposite's true. The earlier you go to bed, the more likely you are to fall into a deep sleep because of the release of arginine vasotocin. Arginine vasotocin is also our natural painkiller. So I have a girlfriend who is a nurse, and I remember this experience when we were in our 30s, because nurses used to have to lift, and many nurses got very bad backs. So nowadays they have little cranes by the bed, they have orderlies that do the lifting because they are losing too many nurses. Anyway, that was back in the day when nurses did used to do some lifting, and she hurt her back very badly. They did a small operation on her, and they basically sent her home with painkillers. And she also knew the problems with that. What are the problems? The problems are it's a drug, it's addictive, and the body gets used to things, and what did a great job at dulling the pain initially doesn't quite dull it, and then the kidneys and the liver are all suffering. But she didn't know what to do, and a man came to town who was a pain specialist, so she went to see him. And he talked about the arginine vasotocin, your natural painkiller. But when you use your arginine vasotocin, and basically your body will use it as it needs it, it gives off a waste. And if that waste is still around the next night, then we don't get a new release of arginine vasotocin. So how do we release the waste? Exercise. So exercise, and this guy was advocating especially for back, is walking. Just walking. And when you get to the hill, you'll get a little bit of high intensity. And when you're walking down, now what's happening when you're walking is not only does respiration and heart rate increase, but your body's throwing off waste via perspiration increases. So that throwing off via the first perspiration is throwing off the waste from using the I don't think I've spelt that right. I haven't. Arginine. I'm still mastering the art of saying one thing and writing another. Arginine. That's better. So when you exercise, the waste given off with perspiration is releasing the waste from using the arginine vasotocin. So that's one big plus about the way exercise helps with the release not only of these hormones, but also the releasing of the waste. But what exercise was also doing is strengthening the muscles, strengthening the ligaments, strengthening the tendons to help compensate for injury in the spine. And I mentioned this morning the story of Tristan and how he manages that serious injury he had by exercise. So my girlfriend was able to come off all her pain-killing medication and manage her back injury by exercise. And as I've just shown you, there's a few things there. Is not only the strengthening of the muscles, ligaments and tendons, increasing the blood supply to there, helping and the body does an amazing job at compensating. You know, the appendix is taken out, the body compensates. The gallbladder is taken away, the body compensates. And sometimes there's a cost for this compensation, but there's only pluses with exercise. So coming back to the release of the pineal gland secretions in these hours, of course to access it you must be sleeping in those hours. The third hormone is serotonin, and serotonin is our mood hormone. What are the children like when they have late nights? Not happy chappies, either of the parents. We had a lady doctor do our program. She was about 35, and she told me an interesting story. She said, both my husband and I are doctors, and we raised our child with, children know, have you heard this view? So we're just going to let the child eat whenever they want, sleep whenever they want, do whatever they want. They're not happy children, are they? The Bible says train up a child, guide a child. And then when we look at the mind this afternoon, you'll see their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. They need us to guide them. And so this child was so obnoxious, just demand, 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 and he never went to sleep till 11 o'clock at night. And she said our marriage was suffering because this child was just out of control, and my husband wanted to pull him into line and I didn't want him to, and so there's all this friction. And so we husband and wife got together and said, we've got to do something. So what they decided to do was put the child to bed early so they could at least have a few hours by themselves. And you know, a united front is a powerful thing. A very powerful thing. And if you want the child in bed by 7, you've got to start working on it at 5. Don't start working on it at 5 to 7. You'll have World War III. So how do you work on it? You make sure they have their main meal in the middle of the day. You eat them, you feed them lightly at night, and then they have a hot bath. That's really good at calming them down. And then take them into the bedroom, and then the lights are low, and maybe some soft music, and read stories about people falling asleep. And it only took a couple of nights, and he just realised that this is what's happening. She said it totally changed the whole family. She said he'd wake up happy. And just those guidelines on sleeping, and they started to bring some more guidelines in other areas, they had a happy child. She said before this he was always miserable, always demanding. She said the scary thing is when you start to not like your child. And do they know it? How do they feel when you're constantly getting irritated at them and annoyed at them? And it's easy to do when they are so demanding, so rude, so unreasonable. It gets this vicious cycle. And so the whole thing changed just because they put him to bed early. He now was getting a nice amount of serotonin. I don't think that is there. So if you want to feel good, go to bed early. Melatonin. Melatonin is the fix and rejuvenate nighttime hormone. This is the hormone that's responsible for the increase in healing in the night hours. It's melatonin, fix and rejuvenate nighttime hormone. In fact, the research is showing that healing accelerates almost twice at night while you're sleeping, but particularly in these earlier hours. So what we want to know is what strengthens and what weakens that. Let me introduce you to the Sustain Me principles. Sunshine. When we allow the sunshine to go into our eyes through the day, it gives really clear signals. Remember, it's the light and dark signals that are fed through the optic nerve to the control center in the brain, which communicates with the body clock, which communicates with the pineal gland. So sunshine in the day and dark at night gives really clear messages to the pineal gland. Never do I suggest you look at the sun. Our eyes will tell us not to do that. But just the way we're all standing out there before, those rays are going in through, giving a clear message. And that's how the sunshine helps us sleep better at night. When I come to America, it's a big trip, depending on what airport. If I go to Los Angeles, it can be about 14 hours. If I go to Dallas, it can be sometimes to 17 hours. And you see, right at the moment, Australia's asleep, so I'm on totally the other side of the world. So a lot of people say, how do you cope with jet lag? I have learnt no matter what country I'm in, I immediately comply with their times. But one thing happened to me that showed me the power of the sunshine in resetting the body clock. So I'm in Wildwood, which is a health retreat, I think it's in Georgia, and there were 25 guests, so I was consulting with them. I'd flown in and I slept well the first night, and that was Saturday night, I think it was, and then the next day was Sunday, and I was consulting all day. And then that night I woke I didn't actually get to sleep till 3 a.m. That's really hard. So the next day I thought, I've got to do something about it. And while I was waiting for the next, because we had so many guests that I was consulting through till Monday, that we had a break, and I turned around and the sun was coming in. We had sliding glass doors in the office, and I just sat there and let the sun just go on my eyes, my closed eyes. And then I opened my eyes and just looked out the window. I slept that night. And the next night, and the next night, and the next night, and the next night, and the next night. Now that happened about 2018 or 17. And so ever since then, whenever I travel to the other side of the world, travelling back to Australia, I think because we're going with the revolution of the earth, I don't have any problem. But coming this way, whew, I've met people that have jet lag for 2 or 3 weeks. And when I investigate, they're sleeping in the day. You sleep in the day, you're not going to sleep at night. And you know what they say to me? But I get tired. I say, well, go and have a cold shower. Climb up to Mount Inspiration. Have a great big glass of water. You don't have to give in to the way you feel. There is one thing that I will do. I'll have a little half-hour nap maybe, but not past about 2:30 in the afternoon. And that's how I learned that the sun resets your body clock. And so I always do it now. So whenever I get to America, I go straight outside, sit in the sun, sit in the sun. And so this last time, only one night I got to sleep, but I woke at 2 a.m. and I didn't get back to sleep. But that was only one night. You can handle one night. So use the sunshine to reset your body clock. Use of water. These hormones need us to be well hydrated to be able to be produced. Water is needed by every single function in the body. So make sure you're drinking adequate water. A 90-year-old man said to me, if I can't sleep, I get up and have a glass of water. It always puts me to sleep. So use water. Well, you can do something else before the water, and that's the whole salt. That whole salt has 3 magnesiums in it. Magnesium is a muscle relaxant. Sleep. I'm going to show you a little bit more detail, some other other things that happen while we sleep. But to get those hours, we've got to go to bed early. And again, you want to get to bed by 9 o'clock, you've got to start thinking about it at 7. This is one thing that will stop sleep, is the opposite to trusting God. There's a statement that I read in Desire of Ages, the book on the life of Jesus, 330, it says, worry is blind and cannot discern the future. But Jesus knows the end from the beginning. In every difficulty, he has a way. He has a way to bring relief. Our Heavenly Father has 1,000 ways to provide for us, of which we know nothing. Remember, worry is blind, and it is a choice, and we'll look at that a little bit this afternoon when we look at the mind. If you get annoyed with the fact that you can't sleep, you will never go to sleep. And so what a couple of authors that I've read, especially Adriana Huffington, she wrote the book Science of Sleep. She said, lie there and be thankful. Be thankful for your comfortable bed. What if it's not comfortable? Be thankful that you're not sleeping out in the ditch and it's raining. Read about the stories of our soldiers in the Second and First World War that had to sleep in muddy ditches, and you'll be very thankful for. There's always something to be thankful for, and in 1 Thessalonians 5:18, the Bible says, in everything give thanks. And lie there and say, thank you, Father in heaven, that I can't sleep because now I can talk to you. One lady said that she thinks about her great auntie. She loved going to her great aunties as a child. She'd think about the beautiful sponge cake she made. She'd think about her beautiful rose garden. So when you start to think about these, you're listing all the things you can be thankful for. So worry, anxiety, stress, and getting annoyed, that will all stop sleep. Abstain. Let me give you a few facts here on some common stimulants people have. Caffeine. Caffeine cuts the release of those hormones in half for 5 hours. And alcohol reduces it by 40%, the output of those hormones. So that bit of alcohol might put you to sleep, but you'll wake with half-charged batteries. Also, what can stop sleep is technology in the bedroom. We can't see that electromagnetic field. We can't see it, but get it out of the bedroom. If you have an electric blanket, yes, you can use it to warm up your bed, but turn it off when you get into bed. Ideally, if there's a television in the bedroom, it should be off at the power point when you go to bed. So be careful of the environment that you're sleeping in. And also abstain from any sheeting that's made out of the nap. Remember the nap? Nylon, acrylic, polyester. I got some beautiful sheets recently. They're linen. I've never had linen sheets before. Cotton, linen. You can get some nice bamboo sheets now. So my daughter, I think I told her, she bought me this linen nightie that's this huge, huge big thing. I just about get lost in it. So I was staying at a place a few months ago, and I got into the bed and I realised the sheets were microfiber. And I thought, oh, I'll be right, I've got my linen nightie. But I woke up after 2 hours just sweaty. So I threw the blankets off because I was hot. And then about half an hour later, I got freezing cold, pulled them back on. It wasn't a good sleep. So I said, do you have cotton sheets? Could I? I think, this lady's so fussy. And it was a big polyester quilt, so I neatly wrapped that up and put it somewhere, and I found a thick cotton blanket and another cotton blanket. The next night, I just slept. And I lie there that first night thinking, oh, this is ridiculous. I've got my linen night. But what I was reading is that these polyesters give off positive ions. And positive ions, they are the negative, that's a positive charge, and they attract more positive ions. They attract more chemicals to them, nasty stuff. So be careful what you're sleeping with. My bed at home, I have a woolen blanket, and then I have a feather quilt on top of that. And in all our beds at our health retreat, they're either the wool quilts, you know, you can get fluffed wool quilts. A lady told me that she went to China and got a silk quilt, and it's fluffed silk. She said it's like you're sleeping under a cloud. So look for natural fibres. I don't know if anyone can afford silk sheets, but cotton, linen, bamboo sheets, and go for your natural fibre. I have stayed in some places where the quilt's not natural, but it's got a cotton covering. But cotton blankets, wool blankets. Do you know, I heard something very, very sad when I was in New Zealand. I was in New Zealand in late April, and the guy that was driving me, because in New Zealand I'm saying, look at all the sheep around. And in Ireland, I was just in Ireland for 3 weeks, the only place you can buy a woolen jumper is in the tourist shops. They say, Irish, what are you wearing? Start buying, you know, support your local industry. And so when I'm in New Zealand, this guy's driving me and I'm saying, wow, look at all the sheep, you know, I hope these guys are all wearing wool, because it can be quite cool in New Zealand. And he said, look, it's really sad. He said, polyester's just got out of control. He said, a polyester carpet you can buy for the same price as a woolen carpet. Why is that? It's because they're buying the polyester. Now, if the house gets a fire, what's going to happen to the polyester carpet? It's just going to melt. Or it'll be like fire hitting kerosene. What's going to happen if the fire hits the wool carpet? It won't burn, or it'll just go down. And if I'm walking on a carpet, I know what I want my feet on. I don't want it on this chemical. I want it on the woolen carpet. I was staying in a house one day, and they had a housekeeper there, and there was 2 little boys, and they just run in with muddy feet on this beautiful woolen carpet. They had woolen carpet all through the house. And she said, I can get this carpet beautifully clean. She said, wool is so good. So I went in that afternoon, and it is as if the muddy footprints hadn't even been on the carpet. Now, do you know what I do if my children would do that? I give them a scrubbing brush. I stop them and say, oh dear, look what's happened. Do you know the helicopter parent does? You're right, children. Yes, right. And they scrub it all up. So what happens every day? The mud footprints come in. My daughter said to me, I've just washed the kitchen floor and the kids came in with muddy shoes. I said, what are the kids doing now? She said, cleaning the kitchen floor. You know, cause and effect. It's the best way. Don't yell at them. Don't get angry with them. Don't frown them. Just go, oh dear, look what's happened. Because often they don't think. But you've got to teach them. That's why the Bible says train. You train them. Now, they mightn't do a good job, but at least they've tried, and then you might finish it off. But abstain from any chemicals. Abstain from caffeine and alcohol going to bed. If you want a good sleep, inhale. Have you tried sleeping with your mouth taped up yet? Through the nose. It would just about eliminate sleep apnea and snoring. Is just breathing through the nose. You'll get better at it. Nutrition. We need peak nutrition. We need to be having adequate fibres, proteins and fats, because these hormones need those basic ingredients to be able to be made effectively and efficiently. Moderation. Moderation in all the good things. Please don't exercise extremely just before bed. It'll be hard to sleep. So moderation in exercise, do it early in the morning. Then you'll reap the benefits all day long. When you exercise in the day, you increase the circulation of the blood to the pineal gland. And so it releases those hormones more effectively. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 12, the Bible says, the sleep of a labouring man is sweet because they're physically exhausted. So when we had all these teenagers in our home, when Michael and I married in 1997, these were the ages of the children. Mine 10, his 11, mine 12, his 13, mine 14, mine 16, mine 19, mine 21. So we had a house full of teenagers and adolescents. And so you know what we do every Saturday afternoon? We'd go mountain climbing. And you know what we used to have? Sometimes 5 carloads of teenagers. And guess what? On Saturday night, they're all worn out. So they don't want to go to the disco. You know what we do? We go to the second-hand shop, get extra blankets, extra bedding, and let them all sleep in our house, because then you know where they are. And you know what that means? You got to keep fit so you can climb mountains with them. But when you're physically exhausted, you sleep so much better. And one of the reasons why insomnia happens today is because people aren't getting physically exhausted. There's the mental exhaustion, but that mental exhaustion almost goes to the stress level. I know that I was in Thunder Bay a few years ago, and Michael gave the people there a selection of the lectures I could do. Well, it wasn't until I got there, they'd already advertised, and they had just put every single lecture down. So on Saturday I had 7 meetings. And when I got to go to where I was staying that night, I was just totally exhausted. I don't think I've ever been so exhausted. And I could not sleep. I was just so exhausted I could not sleep. And so I always asked to see the schedule first. But the problem was they'd advertised and people were coming, and it was a hard one to get out of. But so you've got to protect yourself from over exhaustion, because that can work the other way around. And that, of course, was more mental, much more mental than physical. I was reading the report of a guy that was in the concentration camp in the Second World War. He said no one suffers from insomnia here. Isn't that interesting? Because they're so physically exhausted. Now that's an extreme situation, but I thought, isn't that interesting? They're just so totally exhausted physically that they all fall down into bed and everyone sleeps. Everyone sleeps. So put exercise into your daily routine to help you sleep better at night. Now, it was in about the 1950s that they started looking at sleep a little bit more closely. And what they found, they put all these electrodes on rats. Why do they experiment on rats? Because rats, especially their digestive tract's very similar to humans. Did you know that the milk that is the closest to human milk is rat milk, but we're not going to milk rats. We'll just keep to the goats. But just an illustration to show, it's one of the reasons why they do all this testing on rats. And most people don't seem to mind if a rat dies. But also, rats live 2 years. So they can see what would happen to a rat in 2 years is an indication of what may happen to a human, say, in 70 years. And what they found with the rats is that while they were sleeping, there were times when the eyes were moving rapidly, and the electrodes showed that when the eyes moved rapidly, the brain moved rapidly, because our eyes are an extension of our brain. And did you know, in the book Better Eyesight Without Glasses, he says when our brain is tired and we eye strain, it weakens the eyes. But early morning, when our brain is fresh and not tired and we strain, it strengthens the eyes, because our eyes are an extension of our brain. And last week I was with this 42-year-old guy, and he could not read the program. And I laughed. I said, so a 70-year-old is telling a 40-year-old what it says. And he said, oh, this is terrible. And then I discovered, because he was overseeing the whole, it was like a 4-day conference, he was averaging 2 or 3 hours sleep a night. Can you see why he couldn't see well? He couldn't see well because his brain wasn't sleeping, and our eyes are an extension of our brain. So look after your brain, and because it affects the eyesight. So what they found was, in 90-minute cycles, the eyes would be busy and the brain busy, and then there'd be a 90-minute cycle where the eyes are still, and then the brain is not so active. And this happened every 90 minutes through the night. And they call the non-rapid eye movement time, that's what they name it, when the eyes are still. So what happens in non-rapid eye movement time? In his book Why We Sleep, Dr. Matthew Walker outlines this, but he quotes a lot of research too that has been happening since the 1950s. And what happens in non-rapid eye movement time is there's a courier service. So what's the courier service? So let me draw the brain. Here's the brain from side on. Here's the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is where our short-term memory unit is. So every day, all through the day, everything we're learning, seeing, watching, experiencing is stored in our short-term memory unit. But while we sleep, in non-rapid eye movement time, there's a courier service which takes the short-term memories up to the long-term memory unit, which is in the cortex. So that's happening in rapid eye movement time. Something else is happening in rapid eye movement time, a cleaning system. And what they found is that the brain cells shrink at this time of the night to allow more fluid around the brain cells for the cleaning system to happen. And the cleaning system is done by glial cells. It's called the glymphatic system. And those glial cells are more numerous than the brain cells, and they're cleaning up waste from neuronal activity. They're cleaning up waste from the combustion of oxygen and glucose at the cellular level. They even have the ability, and we'll touch on this afternoon, to clean up negative emotions. So that's what happens in non-rapid eye movement time. Rapid eye movement, we've got some different activities. In rapid eye movement time, this is where a consolidation of what we've learnt through the day happens. And they experimented on this with many students. In fact, they did some experiments in Oxford University, because Dr. Matthew Walker is a British neurologist, and they found that when the students went to bed earlier and slept longer, they retained the information better. But another thing that happens this time of night is there's a filing system. Now, there are some sayings in the neuroscience department. Nerves that lie together fire together. You may have heard it, you may not have heard it. Have you noticed that when everything's going bad in your life, all the bad things that ever happen in your life come up? And if you notice, when everything's going really well, all the good things come up. Because nerves that lie together, they fire together. And what Dr. Matthew Walker came to the conclusion, he said this in his book, he said it's as if sleep has an intelligence, because those memories coming from the short-term memory unit up to the long-term memory unit, they're not just thrown in any old how. There's a perfect order to the filing system. Now, he's an atheist, and when I read in the book, he says it's almost as if sleep has an intelligence. If I was to talk to him, I'd say, it does. It's called the great God of heaven. There's a certain order in the filing system. So all the negatives actually are filed together. All the positives are filed together. And that's the nerves that lie together, fire together. So when a couple are fired up, then others fire up too. There's a filing system happening in rapid eye movement time, so that's a fairly busy time. But it appears that the filing also happens in certain order, and the dreaming that happens at this time helps to determine how the memories are filed. Now, our brain, the front part, where our reason, intellect and judgment is, when we're asleep, that's totally not happening. And usually our reason, intellect and judgment, that's like the filter. That tells us, oh, don't say that, no, don't do that, do this. Well, that's gone. And have you noticed how weird and wonderful dreams are? There's actually no restraint. All manner of crazy things happen in dreams. I remember one night, I dreamt I was pregnant and I took the baby out to have a look, but I couldn't put the baby back. I mean, how crazy is that? You sort of look around and make sure no one knows what you just dreamt. Because your reason, intellect and judgment that actually, it actually says, no, that's unacceptable. That is asleep. But Dr. Matthew Walker came to the conclusion that the dreaming helps to define how the filing happens. This is also when inventions happen. The creating of new things. I think it's a beautiful thing that the creator of the universe gave us humans the ability to also create new things. So I'd like to now show you how these two happen in the night hours. Dr. Matthew Walker, with all the research he did and all the research he studied, he came to the conclusion, and he did not like this conclusion. And the conclusion is, we humans need 8 hours sleep a night. Got that? Notice what he said. He wasn't happy with it. He was hoping that he'd come to the conclusion that 6 was enough. No, it's 8. It must be 8. So we've got a choice here. It can be 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. It can be 9 to 5, that's probably my favourite, or 9:30 to 5:30, or 10 to 6 in the summertime. So let's do the 9 to 5. Let's have a look at what happens at how much non-rapid eye movement and how much rapid eye movement is happening in certain hours. So we'll start with the first 90 minutes is 9 p.m. to 10:30. So 9 p.m. to 10:30, rapid eye movement takes up approximately 80% of the activity. Rapid eye movement, 20% of the activity. And if you were to go to bed at 10, so your first hour and a half would be 10 to 12:30, it would still be that 80%. So the next 90 minutes is 10:30 to 12 midnight. Then it's 60% non-rapid eye movement and 40% rapid eye movement. And then right in the middle of the night, we're looking at 12 midnight to 1:30 a.m. It's about 50-50. And then moving on through the night, we've got 1:30 to 3 a.m. So 1:30 to 3 a.m. we're now got 40% non-rapid eye movement activity and 60% rapid eye movement. And then the last 2 hours, which is 3 to 5. So 3 to 5 a.m. Now we're down to 20% non-rapid eye movement and 80% rapid eye movement. Another illustration of why we need those 8 hours. So if someone goes to bed at midnight every night, they've lost half their pineal gland secretions, and they've also greatly diminished the courier system. Do you know what that means? They can wake up in the morning and the short-term memory unit wasn't emptied properly. You've still got half the information in there. And do you know what that means? It means you're unable to take in the full quota the next day. But what also is happening is the cleaning system is diminished. With Alzheimer's, they have found that when they do post-mortems on people with Alzheimer's dementia, they have amyloid plaques, little calcified deposits built up in that front part of the brain. That's reason, intellect and judgment. Now, someone with Alzheimer's dementia, how is their reason, intellect and judgment? It's sadly diminished. And they have come to the conclusion that these amyloid plaques interfere with and make it not possible for those functions to happen. All through our life, what we're exposed to, it can contribute to the build-up of these little amyloid plaques. But if we go to bed 9:30, 10, especially try and grab at least 2 hours before midnight, that's when the cleaning system is most active. And so what a great way to prevent Alzheimer's and dementia. Go to bed early. Let's have a look at 2 very famous people who boasted that they only needed 5 hours sleep a night. Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. And how did they both spend the last 20 years of their life? Both with severe dementia. Margaret Thatcher, in university, in school, she was revealing brilliant mind. She had a brilliant mind, but she also developed that brilliant mind. Because, well, you've got to be a smart cookie to do what she did. And some say, why did God let her spend the last 20 years of her life? Was it God? It wasn't God at all. Do you know, it was ignorance. And I'm sure that if she realised what those 5 hours sleep a night, how it was going to affect her, she would have changed that habit. She would have quickly changed that habit. In fact, I was reading the report of her nurse in those final years. She'd wake up in the morning and ask for her husband. And the nurse would say, he died. And she would go into severe mourning and sobbing. And this would happen every day. So the nurse ended up, when she asked, she'd say, oh, he must be somewhere. Just so that this poor woman was not going through this terrible mourning process every day, because her reason, intellect and judgment was basically not working. It's not the only cause of dementia. There are a few contributing factors. In fact, there's a whole lot of them, like here. The lady that came to our retreat with dementia, she was, she must have been late 60s, and she came with her daughter because she needed to be cared for because she had dementia. Her daughter was about 45. Now, when I first saw this woman, she was just in the room. She just looked through me. She had a walking frame there. And when I began to investigate, I discovered that this lady was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She drank no water. And she hadn't opened her bowels for 6 days. So, little by little, we introduced the water. A lot of people find having the salt, they can drink a little bit more. A lot of elderly people don't drink enough water because they don't want to have accidents. They're more likely to have an accident if they drink a whole glass at once, but less likely if they take it in little by little by little. We gave her herbs to get her bowel moving. Within 36 hours, we started to see this lady come alive. Within 48 hours, there was no sign of dementia. Yeah. It's nice when it's that easy. It's not always that easy. So the daughter booked in for a second week, and in that second week, she made plans. She was going to get her mother out of that aged care facility and bring her back home. And she lived another 10 years. How nice. So you cannot be absolute. You cannot say lack of sleep is causing this. But as you can see, it's a big contributing factor, a huge contributing factor. When we go to bed early, our non-rapid eye movement time with the cleaning system helps to clean up any beginnings of amyloid plaques. That gets me into bed by. Sometimes I'm 9:15, sometimes 9:30. Occasionally at a stretch it might be stretched to 10. And so when I was meeting with the daughter of the sheikh in Dubai, because she'd been watching my lectures, after a couple of hours I said, it's actually time for me to go to bed now. Oh, okay, she said, okay. Because I know I must. I know I must. Because I want the effects of this every night. I think that 5 hours wasn't 5 p.m. till 10 p.m., was it? No, I'd like to suggest that the 5 hours probably started at about 2 a.m. in the morning. So there are a lot of people are struggling with sleep today, and there can be a few factors. And one is a hormonal imbalance. I met one lady, in fact it was two ladies that came together. They were in their late 50s, early 60s, so they were going through menopause, and they started to apply the yam cream and they slept better. But I know some ladies struggling with sleep and they apply the yam cream, but it doesn't quite have that effect. So that's why you're the doctor, because everyone reacts in slightly different ways. But what the yam cream does is it boosts progesterone. That's your calming, your peaceful hormone. So that might be why that's having that effect. Also, if you watch a movie that's thriller, action, 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 and then turn it off and expect to sleep, you're going to be troubled. So the best way to encourage sleep is to have the lights low, to have a nice hot shower to relax the body, maybe read a book, because the one thing that keeps me awake at night is the chat room. You've heard of the chat room? Maybe it's in my genes, this inventing, but I'm a solution person. So when I wake up in the middle of the night, the chat room. Now I'll go do this and I'll do this and I'll do that. You'll never sleep if you get into the chat room. And I think everyone has a chat room in some way. My chat room would be, Sophie's birthday today. Now I must remember to text her, and I hope that she got the little skirt I made her on time. I send it in the mail, and you'll never sleep. You've got to get out of the chat room. How I get out of the chat room is, and if I'm going to bed and the chat room starts, I get a book. And try and get a boring book. Don't get an exciting book. And you have a soft light, just maybe the lamp. And when the book falls on my chest, I put it aside, put the light off, and often go to sleep. And I've got to do it quickly before the chat room starts up again. But if I wake in the middle of the night, and sometimes I wake to go to the bathroom because I'm a water drinker, sometimes I'll sleep all the way through. But I've got to be careful and not let myself go into the chat room. So how do I get out of the chat room? You can get out of the chat room by lying there and thinking about all the things that you're thankful for. You can do the old age advice, is counting sheep jumping over fences. Or you can count from 100 backwards. My son James said he lies there and says to himself, don't think, don't think, don't think, don't think, don't think, don't think. That gets him out of the chat room. How I get out of the chat room is I go through my memory verses. I love memorising, and the longest chapter that I've memorised was chapter 1 of James, and that's 27 verses. It took me a long time to memorise it. Maybe it took me many months. It's not quick, but it's in my brain now. So I'll go through that, and then my brain has to be thinking about the next word and the next verse. And in the morning I'll think, where did I get? I think I got to verse 13. Halfway through. So it's just getting out of the chat room. There's another way you can get out of the chat room, and that is breath. So breathe in 5 times, count of 5, hold for the count of 3, breathe out for 5. Long, slow, deep, always through the nose. You do 10 of those in a row, often you're asleep, and if you're not, just do it again. And remember, if you get annoyed with the fact that you can't sleep, you'll never sleep. One lady, after hearing this lecture, she said, oh, I'm so discouraged. She said, I'm finally sleeping 5 hours a night, and you say I've got to sleep 8? I said, be very thankful for those 5. When you're very thankful for those 5, then maybe a little bit more will come. And a little bit more will come. That's why you're always thankful. And one lady said to me, I can't sleep, I can't sleep, I can't sleep. I said, don't say that again. I said, because your cells are listening, and you know what they say? It looks like we can't sleep. Our cells are very obedient to our mind. She said, but I can't. I said, well, what I'd like you to start to try and say is, I'm going to try. I'm going to get there. Remember Emma, when she was 5? I'm going to grow up in a minute, Mum. Well, it was many years before she grew up, but you're getting there, you're getting there. It's called cognitive behavioural therapy. Is the way your words and your thoughts have an effect on where you're going. One lady, when she heard this, she said, I never go to bed before midnight. So what she did, and I thought it was very smart, for the next week she went to bed at 11:30. The next week she went to bed at 11. Then the next week she went to bed at 10:30. Then the next week she was getting into bed at 10. She was excited. It's a very similar process of if you want to be in bed by 9, you've got to start at 7. You've got to start thinking about it then. So little by little she trained herself back. And we're looking at a couple of meetings on the mind and how you can you can rewire your brain. You can rewire your brain right up until the day you die. But knowing what I've shown you here enables you to access some of the processes that happen in the body while we sleep. Dr. Matthew Walker, the research he did showed that 10 nights of 6 hours sleep a night, 50% less cognitive performance, 50% less physical mental performance. That's 10 nights of 6 hours sleep in a row. And they got about 20 students in Oxford University, and they all were learning the same thing. 10 8-hour sleep a night, 10 6 hours sleep a night. 3 months later they tested their knowledge, and the ones that were on 8 hours sleep a night, it was almost twice the retention compared to the 6 hours. And because of his research in this field, Oxford University asked Matthew Walker to write a paper in their university magazine on better study habits. And it's interesting for me to note that this article basically went through these laws. Have sunshine every day, exercise every day, make sure you're well hydrated. And he said, get all alcohol, caffeine, cigarettes, get the drugs out. And he said, and go to bed a little earlier and study early in the morning. Even going to bed at 8 p.m. and starting to study at 4 a.m. So can you imagine the difference studying at 4 or 5 a.m. compared to trying to study at midnight, where your brain's tired, Your eyes are getting tired. No wonder the eyes are getting weaker and you're falling asleep. How much do you remember when you're falling asleep while you study? You don't. So it's just changing those study habits. And he also advised that the university put no more exams than 2 a week and put them a couple of days apart. Well, the university never asked him to write an article again. But this is what works. I don't agree at all with the way the exams that they do. It's like cramming information. And how many young people stay up all night for the... And if only they do it little by little and get that good night's sleep so that their brain was sharp. So it's training back. And again, look very carefully at where you're sleeping. Have you got fresh air coming in every night? I would rather have another blanket on and fresh air than to have a temperature where I only needed one blanket on. So even if it's freezing cold, I always try and have that window open a little bit. And just the simple fact of encouraging nose breathing. So tape your mouth, little bits of tape, try that. And that can make a big difference. The other influencing factor with interfering with sleep is having the main meal at the end of the day. A lot of people eat breakfast like a pauper, lunch like a pauper, and supper's king and the queen together. So when we lay down to sleep at night, our stomach wants to sleep. So if you do eat at night, it should be the lightest meal of the day. Foods that are easy to digest. And ideally we should eat, probably, not an hour before you go to bed. Try and leave about 3 hours after the final eating before you actually go to bed. So if you're going to bed at 9, that means probably about 6. That's when you have your final meal. When we go to bed with a full stomach, that stomach has to keep working, because if it stops working, the food starts to rot, starts to ferment and rot, and the body goes to great lengths to keep us alive. So the poor old stomach sees the rest of the body sleeping, but it's got to keep going. And that's another reason why a lot of stomachs aren't working properly, because they're just overworked. The food is put in at the wrong time. I'm against child abuse, I'm against animal abuse, and I'm against stomach abuse. So poor old stomach is not often understood or looked after. So leaving the breaks between meals, and if you do eat at night, make it light. So these are habits that can be implemented little by little. Rome wasn't built in a day, to encourage better sleeping, because sleep is important. I love God's mathematical formula: 8 hours to work, 8 hours to play, 8 hours to sleep. Got that? So if you're overworking, that's something that needs to be assessed. My play is climbing mountains, diving in creeks, playing in the garden, cooking. I love cooking. So all those activities, that's not work to me, that's play. And we always said to our kids, choose something you love, because how nice that your work is something that you love. So we can make the choice to implement these simple things and get better sleep. We're going to have a break now, but I just thought of one more thing before we have the break, and that is some things that you can do to help sleep. Melatonin is something some people have found. Another one is valerian. Valerian is a very strong herb, so maybe in a tincture or a tablet form. And magnesium, some people have said that magnesiums help them sleep. Some people find that just a cup of chamomile tea, chamomile is a mild tranquilizer, a mild sedative. So some of those work. You just got to try them. But I don't think it's a good idea to get dependent on them. Dr. Matthew Walker said, sleeping tablets do not give quality of sleep. So you're far better to conquer this without them. So we're going to have a break now. And as promised, we're going to show you the golden seal. And we're also going to show you the St. John's wort. So Jacqueline has agreed to demonstrate. Thank you. Yeah. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is the St. John's wort. And this is, I guess it's just a weed. But you'll notice there are some little buds there. And I'm going to show you what happens when you squish the bud. Here's. And we hope there's enough buds for you all to try it. I'm squishing the bud, and you'll see, you see the dark purple? So that's on the very tip of the stamens of the flower. So the flower, I'll squish it, but there's no red at all. And so it's just this time of the year. You've got about a month where you can pick those buds and get that dark purple, and that's got the active in it that is a nerve nourisher, nourishes the nerves. So what we did was we picked buds and we put them in olive oil, and if you look at that, you can start to see some of the red coming out, but eventually it'll take about 2 months and that oil will be a dark burgundy colour. And when it is, then you strain the plant out, and now you've got St. John's wort oil. So as a nerve nourisher, that can be just rubbed into the spine from the right up the top way down to the bottom of the spine, and that will nourish the nerves. And though that spine, this spine, see the nerves, they go out all around the body, even down to the feet. So when you put the St. John's wort in there, it's nourishing the nerves for the whole body. So any nervous system problems. St. John's wort has also sometimes been taken for depression, anxiety, because it's a nerve nourisher. It nourishes the nerves. And so if you'd like...
Did you say ADHD yesterday?
ADHD, well, it can help to calm that. It's worth a try because it's the nervous system. And what we might do, and I realise this, we're in a room, because we're outside and you just squish it and you just throw it on the ground. So we might even put that at the door, and as we go out, everyone can take a bud and experiment for themselves and see the purple that you see on my hand.
Barbara, when you put the buds in the oil, do you have to squish the buds?
No.
You
Just put them in. Just put them in. And this is golden seal. See, it's very golden. And this tiny little bit, just trying to see, that was $13.35. See, it is an expensive herb, but you don't need very much. In fact, the average home, that would last about a year. And where would you use it? It depends what you wanted to use it for, because what is its nickname? King of tonics to all mucous membranes. And so you might use it in an eye wash, you might gargle for sore throat, you might rinse your mouth with, there was a question on the canker sores in the mouth. You could make a tea and rinse it. What I would do, if I had those, I'd oil pull half an hour before the meal, I'd eat my meal and then I'd clean my teeth and then rinse my mouth with golden seal tea, and then the remnant of the golden seal will stay in there. But what we talked about specifically yesterday was for sinus. So there's
They might blow it.
there's
The fan might blow it.
yeah. So you see, there's a little dip in your hand. It's called the snuff dip, and that's where people used to snuff from. Oh, good. We'll turn the fan on. Maybe just turn it the other way then. Turn it
Around. There you go.
There you go.
It's still morning.
And you only need the tiniest little amount. So it's probably a 1/16 of a teaspoon of, where will I put it there?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the tiniest little amount, and then, yep. And then you've got to be careful you don't breathe out or gold dust, you'll lose your gold dust. But it's just, sniff it.
Go for it.
Yeah, go for
Plug
it.
up this nostril, right?
Yeah, plug one nostril. Okay.
Oh,
don't
yeah.
blow it. And now the other one.
Okay. This way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Big. Yeah.
Tell you're wearing a drug dealer.
Oh, wow. Yeah, right?
So you might feel a little stingy up there, and when you swallow, you'll feel the bitterness in the back of your throat.
You can taste it.
Yep, she can taste it now.
What's the density? What's the ratio? Is it just, how are you crushing it up? It becomes crushed.
It comes as a powder.
Yeah.
So you're taking the flour out? You're drying it out?
Oh no, this is gold. That's St. John's wort. This is golden seal. It's the powdered root of the golden seal plant. Sorry, we've moved on from that, but I agree that colour of the flower is the same colour. So that's a golden seal, and that's how simple it is. And because it's gold, if that was on my hand, I'd lick it.
I was going to say, you can look
You
at it.
can't waste it. It's so.
Buy it here, or do you drink it too? Like
Pardon?
with tea? Would you drink it?
It's not a very nice tea because it's so bitter. It is so bitter. But you'll see in my book, I think in Sustain Me and Self Heal by Design, there's a recipe for digestive tea. And it has licorice, you'll see it in the book, licorice, dandelion and golden seal, but only a small amount because it is expensive and it's powerful, you only need a little bit. And also we have another mix called gut repair, and it's also in the book, and it's slippery elm, golden seal and myrrh. So there are a few places we use it, but only in small amounts. But a tea for the sore throat, gargle with it, a tea for soreness in the mouth, you could use that. Okay, so
Do you want me to
it's
divvy it out?
break time now.